Hello, this is Florian Munch from Miningscout. Today we have a very interesting topic. We are talking about rare earth. And with me here as a guest is Tim Harrison. He's managing director of Ionic Rare Earth, an ASX listed company. And I'm going to ask him some questions about the rare earth market in general and also about his company, which is developing a quite significant resource in Uganda. So hello, Tim. Nice to see you.
Hi, Florian. Nice to be here.
Yes, as in my introduction, maybe we can quick start it with a general rare earth interview, some questions about it, maybe help investors understand the general market and also like Scandium, the rare earth you are specialized on with your project. What's the use for that?
Rare earths, so very topical at the moment from both a energy transition perspective, but probably more importantly from a geopolitical perspective. Rare earths are, collectively 15 elements that sit down the bottom of the periodic table, called the lanthanide series. And those 15 elements exist in different ratios in different deposits globally. Ionic Rare Earths ourselves, we've got an ionic adsorption clay deposit, which is rich in both magnet and heavy rare earths. It's a very different type of mineralization compared to, many of the numerous hard rock, light rare earth dominant projects. So the elements of interest for us are both magnet and heavy rare earths. Magnet rare earths are typically used in the production of neodymium iron boron magnets. So this is a significantly growing area of rare earth demand presently and forecast into the future. So the magnet rare earths, that includes neodymium, praseodymium, dysprosium, and terbium. And then the other elements of interest to us are the heavy rare earths. Those heavy rare earths are used in a number of high-end manufacturing applications across communications, health, and military and defence. So we're focused on producing these products and working on the development of an alternative, secured, stable supply chain for customers globally.
Mm. And Scandium in particular, so it's mixed with aluminium, and then it's ultra light and gets the metal stronger and so on. So in aerospace, aerosystems, and so on. So how is it?
That's right. Yeah, so Scandium is also an element of significant interest to us at Makuutu. Scandium, when alloyed with aluminium, makes a material that's obviously as light as aluminium, but as strong as steel. So applications across, lightweighting transportation, whether that be automotive or aerospace, is a significant area of opportunity for Scandium. But there are a number of other applications where Scandium is likely to see a significant increase in consumption over decades to come, specifically around energy generation. So whether that be in production of hydrogen or potentially in the development of nuclear fusion. So there are some, technologies that are driving energy transition that'll be dependent on secure, stable supplies of Scandium at a low cost. That creates an opportunity for us with Makuutu.
Talking about supply, how is global supply and demand at the moment? I mean, we all know a lot of rare earths is coming from China or not coming because they are consuming it themselves. So how would you describe the situation right now?
Look, it's an interesting question. Supply demand thematics are going to be driven by what is going to be what we're witnessing now, the energy transition that's occurring. So projections on rollout of EV and offshore wind turbine are two areas that present huge growth opportunities for the product out of Makuutu. So, on the projections on EV rollout, I think, between now and the end of the decade, a threefold increase in the amount of battery electric vehicles that will be produced. And on the application of offshore wind turbine, look, these numbers keep changing quite regularly because there seems to be more and more wind farms being developed or slated for development. And those applications require the development and the production of magnet rare earths. So whilst a lot of the market, we'll get a lot of information and focus around neodymium and praseodymium, or NdPr, the application of magnets for these high-end applications in EVs and offshore wind will be dependent on access to two of the heavy rare earths, which are also magnet rare earths, and they're dysprosium and terbium. And so they're two elements that we see tremendous growth opportunities between now and the end of the decade. I think I saw some statistics or forecasts on projection of a 5-fold increase in demand between now and the end of the decade, or up to 2035. And that's a huge increase in a constrained environment at the moment, which sources all of its dysprosium and terbium from southern China and Myanmar. So with their reserves being depleted in southern China, they're increasing more mining, extraction of material out of Myanmar. That will create ultimately a shortfall in supply to meet the demand projected for economies in the US, Europe, and other parts of the Western world.
Yeah, I was in Australia recently, and I saw quite a good sentiment at the moment for rare earth companies, so new ones popping up and the ones already there getting new attention. So it seems investors are getting that this is a supply-demand story, and maybe the Western world, or how you want to call it, ex-China, is trying to supply itself. So this could be a very interesting topic and a commodity for the future.
Well, very much so. I think if we look at some of the quotes from the president of the EU, the focus is really around lithium and rare earths over the decade to come and beyond. I think the quote's something like rare earths and lithium will be the oil in the future. And realistically, they're elements that will facilitate the energy transition. So without bringing on new supply of rare earths, and specifically magnet rare earths, the energy transition will I suppose, stutter.
Okay, let's talk about Ionic and its projects. So we discussed pre-recording that you have with your project in Africa, in Uganda, the third largest, or maybe the second largest scandium resource reported in the world. So elaborate on that.
Yeah, so we've got a large ionic adsorption clay deposit in Uganda. The mineralized system is covered across 6 tenements that we have, stretches 37 kilometers long end to end. So the mineralized system is larger than the island of Manhattan, and typically near surface, so 3 meters of cover. So it's got a very low strip ratio. And we touched on it there, a significant endowment of scandium. And so as we develop and continue to grow the resource, which is about 530 million tonnes at the moment, we have the potential to double that again with an exploration target, in the vicinity of the existing resource. So we've actually put some drilling results out recently from our Phase 5 drill program, the RAB results on our eastern tenement. That's got huge potential, given that we've now drilled about 70 holes on that tenement, of which 66 of the 70 holes have come back with rare earth bearing clay mineralization above our resource cutoff grade. So there is significant potential for the resource to get significantly larger, and with that sustain increase in production potentially as we get Makuutu into production and grow our production to meet the demands of our customers and supply chain partners.
What's the development stage at the moment, Tim? I mean, development stage, like feasibility study, or how far are you into developing this resource towards production?
So we've got a mineral resource estimate. We've just earlier this year completed a feasibility study and an ore reserve estimate, which gives us some numbers around a 35-year startup project, or Phase 1, Stage 1 project. which really just focuses on the initial central license. We've got the other 5 licenses, which will each progress to their individual mining license applications in due course. But certainly that central tenement, where we've got the mining license application pending at the moment, 35-year life opportunity, producing both magnet and heavy rare earths for new supply chains. The capital development on that feasibility came in at about $120 million US.
That's
and
the total capex.
Total capex, yeah, for the first stage of development. And that would produce circa 1,400 tons a year of rare earth oxide equivalent production. We would produce a mixed rare earth carbonate, which is a value-added product, which could then be exported to supply chain partners that we're working with at the moment, whether that be across Europe, the US, or other markets that they've got an appetite for the product coming from Makuutu.
From my understanding and investors' understanding, so I got some numbers here, like an NPV of 400 million USD, free cash flow of over $1 billion USD. Is the capex of 120 million able to tap that, or only like a starter phase, only a fraction of that?
No, so the feasibility study that we announced was for the initial production of 120 million, and then we just run the project out for 35 years. Okay. Now, we do have the potential to scale up production, but to scale up production, we need to have a customer base and a supply chain that can take that product. And we're really looking at how we can be part of these new supply chains, these alternative supply chains, which will emerge over the decade to come. And so we do see the potential to add additional processing capacity, adding additional processing modules, which will enable us to increase our production. And given the geometry of the deposit, potentially several processing modules across that 37 kilometre long mineralization trend. So, you could have a series of satellite deposits that are, or satellite processing operations that are producing production, which will then go to our relative supply chain partners.
Okay, this gives us the chance now to discuss shareholdings and also the jurisdiction you are in. Ionic Rare Earths is only 60% holder, right now, is that correct?
That's correct. We, as Ionic Rare Earths, we own 60% of the Makuutu project through Renzori Rare Metals, which is our local Ugandan entity, which owns 100% of the Makuutu project. So we own 60%, and we have a very good working relationship with our partners. And I think at some point over the coming year, we will be looking for, if not before, increasing our ownership in the project, which I think will be a key milestone, certainly key requirement for some of our supply chain partners to secure a much larger ownership of the project, if not complete ownership of the project, in order to secure the product to go into those new emerging supply chains through Europe and the US, for example.
Yeah, it's sometimes crucial for investors to understand really the jurisdiction working in, because if you're operating in Australia, yeah, that's quite commonly known. It's a safe jurisdiction. But if you go to Africa, usually there's a big discount in the share price if you compare the project size to somewhere considered safe. But in this case, with Uganda, I think the government and also this group you are in now, the rare earth elements of Africa. So this is they really have an incentive to want that to be developed. Yeah. So can you elaborate on how this all works together?
Very much so. So no, we have a very good working relationship with our partners in Renzori, of which Rare Earth Elements Africa is one of those partners, and very good engagement and dialogue with the Ugandan government. We've done a lot of work in Uganda since we acquired our initial stake in the project back in 2019, and through 2020 and 2021 during COVID, that accelerated our requirement to build a team in Uganda. So we've been there building capability, adding to the the national workforce that we've got, upskilling, and I think that's providing a great foundation now for us to be able to look at, developing the project, but also being able to communicate locally with stakeholders in Uganda that we are planning on being there for a long time, and doing things in the most environmentally friendly and socially responsible way in developing this asset. So from our perspective, from my perspective, we've been working closely with the Ugandan government. We are awaiting the imminent award of our mining license application. We've recently had the approval of the updated mining regulations, which have been gazetted in Uganda, which paves the way now for us to finalise the mining license application, and hopefully we get the award of that application very shortly. This week we've got an important conference here in Perth, Australia, where we're hosting a delegation from the Ugandan government to talk about the next steps in how we see the development of Makuutu progressing.
Yeah, excellent. We discussed a lot about the project, what you have done in the past, how the development stage is. What do you plan for the future? So what's coming this year, maybe next year, and when would a potential production scenario take place?
So right now, whilst we wait for the mining license to be awarded at Makuutu, we're also developing a demonstration plant. So that demonstration plant will enable us to de-risk the project through more metallurgical test work and looking at how we scale up the process, but also understanding, grade control and reconciliation from in situ mineralization to a final product, characterizing both the production at Makuutu, but also the residue and the rehabilitation strategies that we plan to employ at Makuutu. So that'll be a big milestone for us and an important step in de-risking the development and ultimately final investment decision. Through this process, we're going to make production, and we're in discussions, obviously, with several groups about where that product goes into these new emerging supply chains. The demonstration plant will provide us with an opportunity with that production to work closely with our supply chain partners to explore whether or not there are mechanisms that we can look at to improve the quality of the production, the product, but also understand where the product is likely to have the most value in this, the new supply chains that are emerging. So, we've got quite a bit of work to be done over the next 12 months at Makuutu to be in a position to make the investment decision. Through that process, we would anticipate that we'll be able to commit our product to one of these new supply chains that are emerging. That would then support final investment decision. And all going well, we'd move swiftly into the development of Makuutu to align our production timeline with the requirements of our supply chain partners. So one of the biggest challenges for developing an asset like ours is that, in essence, the only capacity that exists for the separation of a product like ours exists in southern China and Vietnam. And so we're working with several groups on the behalf of Western governments who are looking at building refining capability. And our product, being one of the most development-ready ionic adsorption clay projects with product not committed to China, presents a unique opportunity for the production from Makuutu to go in to help facilitate those new Western supply chains.
Yeah.
So, yeah, fair to say there are a number of very keen observers watching our progress very closely as we work through this phase of development at Makuutu.
And I think we should emphasize the clay part, because you don't have to drill hard rock. It's really shallow. So this is all, the threshold for development is really low. Yeah.
That's right. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we've got such a low capital development. Being an ionic adsorption clay, the processing, the mining first, but then following the processing is relatively straightforward. We don't need, billions of dollars worth of capital investment.
Yeah.
We can go with a reasonably modest amount relative of capital investment all the way to a value-added product, being a mixed rare earth carbonate that's free of radionuclides, which mean that we can export a product into emerging refineries that may be being developed in Europe or the US. but also importantly, we can put our product into those supply chains that are wanting to be developed now to feed the energy transition, and scale out production to meet their requirements on growth with modest additional investment to grow capacity. So part of the big attraction of ionic adsorption clays is the low capital development, and ultimately the basket composition, which is rich in both magnet and heavy rare earths. So it is a very clear distinction between a clay rare earth project and a hard rock project, which doesn't offer you the same benefits.
And to not forget it, so Ionic not only has the Makuutu rare earth project, but also is engaged with a subsidiary, a fully owned subsidiary in recycling. Can you elaborate on that briefly?
That's right, Florian. So last year we finalised the acquisition of a business in Northern Ireland, in Belfast, in the UK. Where with Ionic Technologies, we are progressing the development of magnet recycling. So this is the recycling of neodymium iron boron magnets, end-of-life material, but also waste materials that are produced in each of the steps producing those magnets. So we have the ability with a leading-edge technology that is able to hydrometallurgically separate out or chemically separate out the individual rare earth elements and take those all the way back to high purity oxides, which we can then provide to supply chain partners in metal alloy magnet manufacturing to make effectively the materials, the sintered magnets, to go into high-end applications in EV and offshore wind. So we've seen a tremendous amount of appetite for that. Similar to what we've done with Makuutu, we've actually a little bit more advanced with what we've done with Ionic Technologies. We've built a demonstration plant in Belfast. We're producing high purity separated rare earth oxides, and we're able now to progress that through a number of partnerships, which will be announced in due course, to demonstrate what these new supply chains, these sovereign capability supply chains, look like for potential markets in Europe, the UK, the US, and other parts of the world that are looking at sovereign capability.
So investors get two companies in one here. Let's wrap it up, Tim. What would you say is the reason or to the summary? Why should investors look at Ionic Rare Earth right now?
Look, you touched on it a little bit earlier. I mean, discounts, being an African-based project in Uganda, I think we are suffering a bit of a discount at the moment. I think we're in the position of transitioning and growing the business. We've gone through that feasibility study stage with Makuutu, and hopefully we'll have a mining license awarded very shortly, which sets us on a trajectory now to develop that asset. And I think with Ionic Technologies being a producer now of separated magnet rare earths, we're able to progress the supply chain engagement, which ultimately becomes a beneficiary for Makuutu long term. So, we're addressing the emerging or requirement for an alternative supply chain from both primary and secondary produced magnet rare earths, and through that building a lot of relationships in the supply chain, which mean that we are at the table having some meaningful discussions now, and hopefully we'll be able to capitalise on that over the coming 1 to 2 years.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Tim. So everybody, this is Tim Harrison, Managing Director of Ionic Rare Earths, and you can look up the story at the company's website, also on Miningscout. The ticker symbol on the ASX is IXR, and I will post the WKN for the German investors below. Thank you very much, Tim.
Thank you, Florian.